Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our latest webinar. For those of you eagle-eyed amongst you, I'm not Andy Banks, of course. I'm Josh. I'm Head of Sales and Marketing for VentureForge. Although we have been told we sound very similar. Not sure we do, but there we go. But look, thank you for joining us. We're here today to discuss Amazon Teams and I guess the complexity that sits behind it in the 2025 year. As we know, the platform is becoming more and more complex, from recruitment to structures to onboarding to remote versus in the office. So we've got a great panel today. So we've got three people joining us that will give us a really structured and balanced conversation, from agency to in-house to the recruitment side of it as well. So hopefully we'll get a really balanced conversation and give you some really good insights on how everybody's approaching that structure from different angles. I guess before we kick into the session, it makes sense to do a couple of introductions. Conscious there's a couple of new faces. Jonathan, you are top left on my screen. Can I hand over to you first of all?
Of course you can. Thanks, Josh. Good morning, everyone. I was going to say great to see you. It feels like the obvious thing to say, but of course I'm talking to a video recording looking back at myself, so I'll swerve that one. But I'm Jonathan Newton, co-founder and chief operating officer of VentureForge. I'm going to try very hard not to come with an agency bias into this conversation today, but I'm sure Pat and James will keep me on my toes and bring me back to centre. So looking forward to speaking to you all.
Perfect. Thanks, Jonathan. Pat, bottom left.
Hi, I'm Patrick Murray. I'm partner of research, setting up our Amazon and marketplace division. So basically what that means is I recruit Amazon specialists at all levels, all day, every day, for both brands and agencies. I wouldn't actually say I have a bias one way or another, to be honest with you. You're all very nice to me, so I try.
Very diplomatic, Pat.
Yeah, no, I've been in research 2 years, and the last 2 years, I guess the cool thing is I've placed the most people in the entire business. So we've got a lot of experience to talk about how to get this right, or how I think it should be done anyway.
Yeah, definitely. And do you know what, Pat? I'll support that. Obviously, we've used you for some of our recruitment as well. So I think having that outside-in view sometimes is really beneficial.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then James, bottom right, sorry.
Yeah, last but not least. Hi, James. So I work for a company called Paladone who do license gifting. So we own the official licenses for companies like PlayStation, Disney, and we do a lot of their housewares and lighting. I, in my background, have actually in-housed from agency on 3 separate occasions, but I will try to not come with that bias because I'm outnumbered at the moment.
If you drop off the screen, we know why. Perfect. Thank you very much for that, James. So look, I guess before we kick off, we usually start these sessions with a bit of a poll, just to understand where you as the audience are at with this, so we can try and tailor the session a little bit. So hopefully Whitney, our glamorous assistant in the background, is going to pop a bit of a poll up on the screen. If everybody could just take a couple of seconds just to read and answer those questions, and then we can share it with the panel so we can move it forward. So interestingly, most people have got specialists or an agency they're currently using. And actually, interesting, a lot of people just have one person that's covering all areas. Like, that's a topic we're going to talk quite heavily about, because I think what's quite interesting, I guess, when we get into the weeds of it, is how big is that? How complex is that business? You know, have they got to the point where they need specialists, or is it one person without tech? So I won't give too much of a spoiler. Well, perfect. Thank you very much for that. So just looking at those results quickly, majority of people do have teams of specialists or agencies, dropping down to then about 30% of the audience just has one person covering all the areas. And then a small proportion, about 15%, are unsure of what they need from the resources. So I think kind of looking at those results, what makes sense? I guess let's start this at a really, really high level. Jonathan, probably looking to you in the first instance for this, of what structure does it take to run an Amazon business?
Good question, Josh. And I think that the honest answer is it really depends on the branding question, how big they are, how important Amazon is as a strategic channel to their business or as a proportion of overall sales, perhaps. And I think there's also some quite subtle differences in the selling model that the brand may be using, whether that be seller or vendor, because there is some pretty seismic differences in terms of the team structuring that would need to run that seller, vendor, or hybrid business. I think if I look at this from I was going to say from a selfish point of view, from an agency, and it's not a selfish point of view, but let me tell you a little bit about what we do internally and then how we think that best applies to brands. So typically, I think a good Amazon team will consist of generally some sort of orchestrating role, whether that's an account manager or an account director, someone that can see things really holistically from a top bird's eye view and understand the business's objectives and what they're striving to achieve. And they will have a good generalist background in skill set. They'll understand everything from minor technicalities to overarching Amazon structuring and what to do right, wrong, or indifferent. They will generally be supported by an advertising team. And whilst historically many individuals in a more generalist role will have advertising as part of their remit, as the Amazon advertising solution continues to mature and develop at a really, really rapid rate, that skill set is becoming much more challenging to obtain on a regular basis and much more broad in terms of the deliverabilities and expectations in that role. You then start to think about content specialists, and that come in the form of, it could be a design team, it could be someone within a marketing team, but Amazon is a very hungry beast when it comes to content and creative, right through the spectrum from product detail pages to display banners, DSP, and so forth. And I guess one thing that's often overlooked is operations. You know, Amazon sits almost like a business unit in its own channel. So everything from strategy down to warehouse and execution, that operations team are going to be essential on picking, packing, dispatching stock, understanding all of the pitfalls that come with managing Amazon from an FBA, seller fulfilled prime, or even a vendor point of view. There is complexity right down to the guys in the high-vis jackets in the warehouses doing what they do day in, day out. And I think to try not make this a politician's answer, because I recognize this could go on forever, you know, there has to be a core link into marketing, into finance, and into software partners to ensure that Amazon is done really robustly, really well, and consistently always on. So for me, I think 3 to 4 core roles within a business, but with dovetailing into widest business functions, makes the perfect team.
Yeah, and do you know what? It's quite interesting when you talk to some brands, they believe it's one person. But when you start to layer up those touch points,
I mean, don't get me wrong, Josh, you're absolutely right. You know, many brands will successfully build really good, robust Amazon businesses by having a single point of contact. But I think as Amazon continues to mature, continues to become more complex, and brands rely on Amazon more and more as a direct-to-consumer sales growth channel, that one person is highly unlikely to have the continuing skill set they need to touch everything well. And more importantly, they probably don't have the time to do it. If I'm honest.
Do you know what? You touched on something quite interesting, Pat, one of your LinkedIn posts that was yesterday or the day before. Potentially you were talking about that kind of senior seat within the Amazon business. Yeah. Is that something you see that's coming through in 2025 quite heavily?
Oh, I hope so. But no, like, it's interesting because, like, I think it was starting to kind of become more of a norm, not in every single business. And I do want to caveat, not every single business needs an Amazon person on like a seat at the table in the senior leadership team, because they're just not set up for that yet. I think it's ever evolving, but I do believe, like, as to echo Jonathan's point, as it becomes more complex and companies try to understand how to utilize it better and what role it can play in their business, away from just being one solitary sales channel, and actually that full funnel, say, the behemoth that it can be, they are going to need someone at a senior leadership level or the seat below who can actually talk at that senior level. Because what I describe it kind of as Amazon IQ, and you could probably say it's like Amazon experience. In every brand, it gets to a level where that stops. Some companies it's account manager, some companies it's, you know, can go up to account director. But if you don't have that account director or that senior person who's been through it, done it, probably worked on it before it was a sexy channel, right? A sexy. You needed to be on Amazon pre-2020 to 2022, I'm saying. They don't know how, they haven't seen the pitfalls of it, but they don't know how to speak the language of senior stakeholders that they need to get on board, because it has a niche way of working in the finance. It has niche operations, as Jonathan said. The marketing and infrastructure is different as well. So I do think as companies start to understand it, they will start hiring at that more senior level. But again, there's just not a lot of that still on there.
I think it's easy to lose sight of the fact that marketplaces as a general wholesale collective, not just around Amazon, are less than 20 years old. So the maturity of how businesses think about structuring their marketplace teams is always going to be slightly more immature unless the marketplace presence within the brand is so big. It has to be considered and it has to be thought of. You know, I mean, I can see a world whereby we're starting to talk to chief marketplace officers. That role just doesn't exist in the majority of cases at the minute, but there will be chief e-commerce operatives, or there'll be heads of e-commerce. And we really shouldn't think about marketplaces as any different to how we think about e-commerce functions. It's the same thing.
Yeah, definitely. Something quite interesting.
You're exactly right there.
Go, James, go on.
Yeah, you're exactly right there. The thing is, because it hasn't reached that point of maturity yet, a lot of what I've had to do for the last 5 years is really coach exec teams, boards, leadership teams in whatever function they are, and really act as a politician and make sure that they understand that this is the way it's going. All of the things that you described about how to build an Amazon team, they're all correct. But if you think about it, that's how you build a country team. That's how you actually build a business. Amazon has got to the point now where Amazon should be looked at more like it's Italy or more like it's France than it is an actual particular account. And for the 29% of people that said that they're one person covering all areas, I've been there. I feel your pain. It does get better, but a lot of what you've got to do is see that. And actually, when you're building a business, what do you need? You need somebody that's overseeing it, the MD type role, which is where that director of ecom, head of ecom, that person comes in who has the oversight. But then you have your specialisms within that, and in those verticals, like you say, you have your sales vertical, your ops vertical, your marketing vertical. Now, whether those are in-house or outsourced, you still need those skill sets, because otherwise you're not going to get the best return. I know PPC. I used to have to do PPC. Am I an expert in it? No. And will the return be as good if I'm doing it compared to outsourcing it or getting a specialist? Definitely.
Yeah, 100%. And I think if you look at, and Pat, you probably have more insights on this than me, but if you look at that job market, and I think historically how people used to recruit, it was a NAM account manager style role, whereas now it's becoming an Amazon exec, an Amazon direct. So that specialist skills started to slowly creep in, because it can't just be treated as another national account, because obviously it behaves very, very differently in each business. You smiling at that, Pat? I guess you agree?
I totally agree. I agree with everything that's been said so far. I laugh quite a lot at I mean it in a nice way when I'm laughing at the Amazon team of one. Because if it is one person just doing everything with no external support, that's when I say it's a team of one. You're doing everything. You can probably kind of run the business, but you're never going to grow it. You're not going to get any strategic growth. You're not going to be able to open up new markets and again any sort of competitive advantage over your category, right, or other brands that you're kind of coming up against. The Amazon, it's been interesting, right, because Amazon as a channel, it historically, again, before it became cool and sexy and interesting to talk about, was always bumped onto someone else's account. It was like, Tesco NAM's doing well. Okay, cool. Sure, we need to kind of reward them. There's no job for them yet. So we give them Amazon, that little place in Slough. And so that's happened a lot. But as time's gone on, which is really cool, obviously it has become a specialist skill set and a specialist role in its own right. And I guess why I have a job at the moment, which is lovely. But it's also been interesting because obviously sometimes it gets plonked onto, similarly from a national accounts perspective, it can just go into the ecom director. Now, historically, and I used to actually recruit ecom, D2C people as well. Historically, a lot of the appetite was we don't really want to do Amazon. It cannibalizes our sales. It's the same customer, but we get worse margins. But it feels, again, we're on this evolution where the forward-thinking people are like, shit, sorry for swearing. Actually, Amazon isn't it's a different customer. People like all of the Prime users, and you can say what number, 13 million, 14 million, however many it is today in the UK, most of them probably do shop on Amazon first. Unless you're a real brand loyalist and your brand has that much fantastic equity that people are searching for you specifically. And there's not that many actually out there that probably do have that brand equity, in my opinion. So it is becoming more of a specialist skill set. But as Jonathan's pointed out, James pointed out, one person can't do it all. If you want to take it seriously.
Yeah, I think I'm generalizing hugely here, and apologies to the audience that have got one team member or are that one team member doing this. I suspect you're running your accounts incredibly meticulously. I think you'll be a real granular expert. Your account health probably is going to be immaculate. You'll know the inside out of your vendor terms. It will be like a well-oiled machine. the thing you're likely to be struggling with is evolution. You won't be seeing the growth that potentially you are. You won't have the time to look at competition. Your insights will be faltering, and you'll have realistically only half an eye on where Amazon's going as a future developing machine. And I think that's where you're likely to find yourself trapped. You'll be bogged down in the detail, bogged down in the grind, and it'll feel tiresome and it'll feel exhausting. Certainly having been there ourselves as a smaller agency, and when I've been in brands working in those types of roles, it can be really debilitating.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Just sticking on that subject of kind of finding the specialist, finding the right person for that area. James, when we were talking the other day, you'd spoken quite a lot about how you've in-housed in quite a few businesses. Once you've kind of found the structure that you want to go with, how do you then go about finding the right talent and people? And I guess the bit that sits off the back of it, is it hybrid? Is it remote? Is it a combination of? How do you approach that?
Yeah, after phoning Pat, the second step is to. I was going to jump in first. So no, really we need to. We always take a step back. The very first thing is, what are we actually going to be able to find out in the market? And that is the reason why I'll speak to Pat. I'll say, actually, who's out there? What does that look like? And what does it cost as well, to get a better understanding? Because, like Jonathan mentioned earlier, the cost of PPC skill set has skyrocketed. I remember hiring people a few years ago, and it continues to go up. And it's a great time to be a PPC exec, because that skill is constantly increasing in price. And then it's a case of, actually, can we get that in? Is there skilled in the local area? Now, where I've been based previously, the Midlands is not a hotbed for Amazon talent. It's normally centered around the north and around kind of Manchester, Leeds way, and then down in London. So actually hiring Amazon talent in the Midlands is difficult. There are people out there, and there are really good people out there, but they're few and far between. So asking people to come into the office, that may be a 40-minute trip for them. It may be a 2-hour trip for them. And so then you need to start thinking about location versus skill set versus cost, and seeing what's actually out there and playing all of those things together. I would always rather have the best people, regardless of where they are. My PPC lead is actually based in North Macedonia, and he is incredible, absolutely brilliant, and he's the best I've ever worked with. Now, I'm lucky that I can hire remotely, and I can hire him there because we've got the setup to do that. But again, we're based down near Brighton. If the best person was based up in Leeds, that's the person I would want. But I would still want them to be able to interact and come down to the office and actually see people and see the showroom and actually interact, because you do lose something being entirely remote.
Yeah, 100%. And Jonathan, sorry.
No, I was just going to jump in, James. I mean, we're a fully remote agency for largely speaking that very reason. We can't build a successful, maturing, expert Amazon agency by only centralizing around where, in principle, some of the senior leadership team is. So our team are as far north as Glasgow and as far south as London, and everything else in between. But, you talk about that ability to get together, and we encourage our team to spend as much time as we possibly can together, as well as coming together on regular basis for things like quarterly business reviews and so forth. And our team are getting out to see our clients. There is something still incredibly important. And I think, when we're now a number of years post-pandemic, I think the need for humans to come back together it's like a huge elastic band, isn't it? We've stretched it to the point of breaking, and then we want to come back together now. And I'm seeing much bigger of a trend now on even team members who we're recruiting into the agency, whilst they are encouraged for the fact that we've got a work from anywhere policy and we are fully remote. They are asking questions like, how frequently can I see the team? How often do we get together? How often do I go out and see my clients? So you're right, James. I think that the ability to hire remotely is fundamentally important as we continue 2025 and beyond, but getting together again becoming even more important for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
As you're building out a full team as well, you've got to remember that yes, you're hiring senior people, you're also hiring that mid-level, you're also hiring junior people as well. And because of the way that the housing market's gone and everything else, these guys may be living and working out of a bedroom at their parents' house. And so actually the office is an escape for them. It's somewhere that they can actually go and not just be in one room most of their lives. And that was something that was really difficult during COVID, and it caused a lot of mental health issues. And actually having that ability to get into an office is really important. But you've got to think about that, you know, again, like you say, you can't just centre around what senior leadership like to do. I prefer being fully remote and coming into the office every so often, but that doesn't mean that that's what everyone's preference is.
Yeah, definitely. Do you know what? And the more and more brands, agencies we talk to, there does seem to be a bias towards hybrid or fully remote. You know, like you say, rightly say, the skill set you can get, it opens up so many doors. I guess just flipping on the head, Pat, you were talking about kind of dead spots in the country the other day as well. So if there's certain areas people are looking to recruit and work fully in office, I'm guessing that might change.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because I'm always telling people I'm the exception as opposed to the rule. So I come into the office 5 days a week, right? Out of choice. No one makes me. I love it. But I haven't recruited like a 5 day a week job since 2020. And it was literally the last person I placed. She just joined the day before we went into lockdown. It was about to be announced, and had to get her computer, her laptop, and her kit so she could work from home. It's interesting, right? Because there are places in the UK, right? Like James has kind of hit upon it. The hotbed about Amazon talent could be 1 or 2 people. And if you're asking people to kind of come into the office multiple times in the week, that's your talent. Genuinely, that's your talent pool. It's almost like, okay, that is your talent pool. This is what you're. There's great people. Don't get me wrong. We've made really great placements, but they didn't have the choice. Like it was, here's a couple of people in the shortlist or 3 people in the shortlist. And you've got to also remember, these people have to want to work for your brand as well. There has to be a compelling enough reason for them to want to join the brand. I often see when it's a 5 day a week role, honestly, that you could probably get 1 or 2 people on the maximum as a shortlist. Depending on where it's based, depending on who the brand are, depending on the culture, depending on all the other preconceived ideas people might have on the company. And it does become a lot more difficult. But likewise, to echo your point, guys, one, I come into the office all the time. I do like that human connection. We do have people who refuse, not refuse. I don't want to work a fully remote job. I want to work with people. I need that human interaction. And I genuinely think if that, with these remote roles, like you guys have said, you do need some, whether it's quarterly, whether it's monthly catch-ups where people can actually have conversations in person, especially if you're hiring someone new at a senior level in Amazon, with an Amazon specialism, and there isn't an Amazon, that you are the Amazon specialist in the company. You're going to need to do as James says, the politicianing internally, and kind of win people over and get them thinking to your, understanding why Amazon's important. I don't think you can necessarily do that on a number of team schools. I don't know how you can build that relationship, build that trust, get them to see the importance of Amazon if they've been 20 years never thinking of Amazon, right? So yeah, I mean, to get back, and I kind of digress there a bit, Josh, apologies, but I do think there's areas in the UK where companies would need to be more flexible with their working policy just because of where they're based. And it is still a niche skill set, right? It isn't like everyone who's coming out of school now or coming out of uni now, they're going, I want to work in the Amazon space. Because a lot of people kind of fall into it, right? And then they become experts through experience.
100%, yeah, completely agree with that. And something quite interesting, which you've all kind of touched on, James, you specifically called it out there, was the mental health side of it. But I guess what sits alongside that is the support, development, and onboarding. So I guess, James, just going back to you and the examples you've used there, how do you onboard and manage that team if they are, for example, in that junior position? How do you develop them whilst they're working remotely?
Yeah, it really starts with having clear SOPs, which is something that, it's not, and full honesty, that's not something that I've had over the last couple of years. We've been building them as we go. Luckily, I've got a kind of a portfolio of many SOPs that I've written over the years, but without actually understanding exactly what needs to be done on a granular level for each of those roles, it's going to be difficult whether you're teaching them in person or remotely. And starting from that point on, and then understanding actually what you want them to do, making sure their job description's clear, making sure that they understand what's expected of them, you can then build up to that. So whether you're hiring at whatever level you're hiring at, if they don't have a clear set of a clear role, a clear set of instructions, actually a clear day to day, it's going to be near impossible to train them. So start back at what the process will be, and then when you're training them, you also need to understand their personality, because everybody learns in a different way. Some people are visual learners, some people are doers, some people can just read what's on the screen and pick it up from there. So you also need to tailor it to that. Now, if you're fully remote, you can't sit next to them and do it, but what you can do is open up the screen, work through examples together on screen, and then pass the screen over to them and ask them to work through it. And it does feel a bit like somebody sitting looking over your shoulder when it's on screen rather than next to you, but it's a way to get that done. I'd always prefer, it's always preferable if the onboarding can always be in the office. And let's say the first 1 week, 2 weeks of what they're doing, you can actually sit there so they can get an understanding for you, can read body language as well and understand when people are joking versus when they're serious. It's easier still to tell in person because we've got 100,000 years of ingrained learnings in our heads. That's the way we go. So I'd always prefer to do it in person. But when I was at Elevate, one of the big brand aggregators, we were fully remote and everybody was onboarding remotely as well. But that was how we had to do it. We had to make sure that it started from a clear job role and description and SOPs so that we could make sure they had the detail.
I think it's a really interesting point, James, and it's music to my ears to hear that. That's how you kind of absorb that team member, take them under your wing, and recognize that as individuals they've got a different style of learning, and that's very much the way we onboard our new team members within VentureForge. We actually go through a 4-week induction program that is very, very detailed to not only give them the technical skill set that they need to perform and role, but they understand the culture, what our clients are looking like, the challenges that they might be going through, and so forth. But I actually think as an industry, I actually think we're being let down. If you look at any other comparative digital marketing discipline, whether that is paid advertising, search engine optimization, affiliate marketing, e-commerce trading, Google any of that, and you will be hit with an abundance of training courses, certifications, gurus, you name it, it's out there. Try and do the same for marketplace, in particular with Amazon or even one of the more slowly emerging marketplaces. Take something like Etsy or OnBuy. Good luck finding any credible training apart from someone on YouTube who is driving around in a Lamborghini believing they're an expert and you can make $1 million overnight. It is crazy. And I think, it's a real poor reflection, I think, on the quality that exists, not only globally, but in the UK, because there is this halo effect of, pardon my French, this bullshit training and marketing that everyone can do this really, really well. And the reality is it's a difficult skill set. It takes a lot of determination and quality to get right, but there isn't an official body that represents marketplaces that can go, this is where those coming out of university as postgrads or wanting to get into the industry can learn really, really well. That's down to good people like yourself, James, and brands that want to take people on board, agencies like ourselves, and there's many of us out there who want to take people in and move them into a discipline that's developing really fast.
Yeah, 100%. And I guess, Jonathan...
There's also opportunities to partner with universities as well. Mm-hmm. You can partner with universities if people are looking to do training, something around marketing, for example. There are so many aspects of the business that are relevant to what they're doing, and there's always opportunities to do that as well. So if you have a local university to you, speak to them and see what might be out there. Because if people are looking to learn even from a social media aspect, from a marketing aspect, from a content aspect, all of those things can actually lean, business especially, all of those things can lean into an Amazon skill that's there. So it's worth a chat as well, because after they come out, they've got relevant skills, and it can help all of us in the market looking for good people.
Yeah, definitely.
I think it's quite interesting you said earlier about it being quite a sexy, new, exciting industry. Put Amazon to one side for a second. Marketplace is a buzzword in everything that we do nowadays. So it's taking over D2C. It's becoming e-commerce in a lot of businesses. Marketplace is the sole focus. So I think you're absolutely right there, James. If you look at the talent and how that's structured, you're probably right. There will be completely specialist university courses in the next 2 to 3 years around some of this. So I think it's a really good way to bring the talent into the business. I guess just sticking on the topic of remote working, and Jonathan, I know from our perspective, we spend a lot of time, and even in board meetings, talking about this kind of thing, but How do you create that kind of collaborative, communicative? Is that a word?
Easy for you to say.
How do you create that in a remote business? Because as you rightly say, we are all the way up to Scotland, all the way down to London. It's not easy as just a coffee machine chat.
Yeah, I think it's really tough, to be honest, and I'm really quite proud to stand up and say that in a fully remote agency. It's something that we have to work really hard at, and there are great tools out there, and we utilize great tools to keep people in contact and keep that discussion and dialogue going throughout the business. But I think, as if I look at our own personal journey within VentureForge, we're 5 years into this journey, and I now start to think that we're starting to see the next phase of our own maturity around, as our team grows, as the amount of clients we service grows, the way we communicate is going to have to change. I think we're going to have to get more dedicated channels to talk about dedicated things rather than it being almost a melting pot of communication. But I still don't think we should ignore the fact of the soft, squidgy bit that makes humans human beings. It's that, did you have a rough night the night before because you look really hungover, or can I get you a coffee because you look like you're stressed, or do you want to go and grab some lunch? I think that's the thing we personally miss as a remote business, and we have to work really hard to compensate for that by giving our team members lots of attention, lots of great perks and benefits, coming together as a community and doing fun things. As an example, this month we're doing a step count challenge where we've brought individuals together in teams to see how much we can walk, and there's prizes at the end of it and that type of stuff. So it's by doing little community events that I think we can make a big difference. But I think any remote business who is ignoring the fact that humans need to be humans and get together is probably on a route to a hiding eventually.
100%. And I think when you look across teams, and James, you rightly said this earlier, some people do like the remote element, some people don't. Pat, as you said, you want to be in the office. Everybody is going to operate so differently. And I guess we always kind of joke a bit about this, but the one thing that is missing is that coffee machine chat. You walk into an office and you have 50,000 questions because everybody's just been saving it because they didn't want to pest you, because you can't see that somebody hasn't got their head in a detailed, SOP build or whatever it might be. So it's not as easy sometimes just to pick up the phone and have a conversation.
Do you know, it's interesting. I think this comes back to a number of points we've all made, but for the businesses and brands who are listening into this webinar, and there's about 50 odd people on this call listening in, if you one of those brands with a single point of contact, and that single point of contact is remote, a lot of that conversation is going to be very functional. I'm coming to talk to you about this thing, or I'm going to come and talk to you about that thing. Whereas if that individual is in a connected business and in a physical business, the likelihood is that knowledge share will be quite infectious. It will start to naturally spread into other team members, other departments, and the senior leadership team will start to get a better understanding for the pitfalls and trials and tribulations of running an Amazon business, as opposed to that kind of isolated singular role that may be sat in the comfort of their own home, for sure.
Definitely. And that probably leads quite nicely on to the next topic of retaining talent. As we've rightly called out, there are a lot of challenges that do sit around this style of method of working. I guess without aiming this at anyone specifically, has anybody got any tips around how you do retain the staff and keep them within the business and develop them?
Pat, do you want to have a bit of an objective view to this? I've got my view on this, but I'm keen to hear from a more central view.
I think it kind of, it's like, I think it's actually not specific to Amazon, if I'm being honest with you. I think when we're talking, I think it's like, how do you retain talent? Okay, well, do they have clear objectives, and how do they progress their career? Some people don't necessarily always want to progress their career, right? Some people get to a level and they're like, do you know what? This works for me. It works for my life. It works. I love it. And that is absolutely fine. I think so it goes back and harks back to understanding the individual, what their motivations are. Sadly, loads of us are motivated by money. So it's like, okay, cool. Do we understand what they're paid? Do we understand what the market's paying? When was the last time they got a pay rise? Do they deserve a pay rise? That sort of stuff. Lovely. Bonuses. A lot of the roles we were talking about are quite commercial. Do people feel they're fairly rewarded? Are they aware of what their bonus criteria are, if there is one? And how do we kind of reward that? Progression. I think that's the big piece. And I think I mentioned it, like we've mentioned it a few times before. Is there an opportunity for someone to have that more senior leadership role with an Amazon focus if they come from an Amazon role? Okay, what does that look like? What are the parameters? Or also support, because if you are like, and going back to Jonathan's point, I'm sure there's loads of people who do operate as a team of one on Amazon in their brands, and I don't mean anything I say disparagingly, because I've placed quite a few of them as well. So But it's how long can that go on for? If you really want this person to like grow us into, if it's a UK based business, we want to do the EU, if we want to do the US, or we want to do like the Middle East, and Australia is obviously kicking off now as well. Like, how are they going to get the opportunity to take on that task, and then are they going to get resource and support? So whether that is hiring through me as another person, or going out to an agency for that external support, which can take off some of the granular details so they can look at strategic things. But again, not everyone wants every single one of those things. So I think it comes back to like understanding that person's motivation when they start. But actually, we are like Amazon. We evolve. Like humans change, and our motivations change based on loads of different stimulus that come to us all day, every day. And it's about basically understanding that person through their journey and lifetime with your business, because what that person you hired 2 years ago was motivated by might not be the same thing today. And actually, they're probably more valuable to the business today, based culturally, because they've been there for a few years. In terms of they understand the business, they understand how it operates. They've probably done some great stuff and got some great results. How do we keep them engaged? But it comes down to motivations. Now, to caveat that, it doesn't just mean we have to throw money. People shouldn't just be getting money thrown at them all the time. And if anyone's watching that thinking I should march in and ask for a pay rise, don't necessarily do that. I want to caveat those things. But I think it comes with a level of maturity, right? You've got to ask the person and hope you're getting the best, like they're answering in good faith as well, right? And so that's kind of how I would say it. Like it's an ever moving beast. It's difficult, right? Because there are a lot of businesses out there who will advertise a job and people will look and see what the salary is straight away, and it could be X amount more than what someone's getting paid. But it doesn't mean that person's going to get the job, is what I always have to say to people. Just because that's the same title, it doesn't mean it's the same job. The title can be quite misleading because it's still too new to be uniform across the board. But
Sorry, Pat. There's a point there about the newness of the industry, I think, and I think it goes back to my point I made around marketplaces being inherently only a couple of decades old.
Yeah.
Really great talent is not widely accessible for marketplace in any particular role, and therefore, there will be this cycling and this churn of great talent who move from agency to brand to agency, maybe go into aggregators, come back out, maybe trial a hand in certain individual disciplines and come back. So I think it's largely to be expected that this agency will be quite a melting pot of movement for some considerable time, because talent gets poached. People want to move around, and I read quite an alarming statistic quite recently, but maybe this is just from an older, grayer, bolder guy, is that average tenure of an individual within a marketplace team is less than 2 years in any role. Now, of course, there will be massive sway. Yeah, Pat, that might be a great thing to you. It might be a horrifying thing. There'll be massive sways to that where people don't stay within business for 2 years, and to the opposite, stay within a business for much, much more than 2 years. But, we have to maybe be accepting as an industry that great people are going to move around, because there'll be this constant desire for change in an industry which is very young and really quite exciting in comparison to some more traditional e-commerce and digital marketing sectors.
Yeah, 100%.
With that, was that time in a role, or was that time within an organisation? Because
organisational level, James.
The market. Yeah, because this is the thing, the market's moving so quickly. One of the biggest things that in every organisation, like you said, average age of a company is, let's say, 10 to 20 years in the UK. They come from an environment still where people would come into a role, they'd come in as a junior, they would work 3 to 5 years, they would then become a senior, they'd then work 3 to 5 years, they'd then become a manager. But like you say, because of this acceleration of what's happened here, if you want to retain people, one is you need to give them the opportunity to progress and that could be in their role, their specialism, or in their rewards, in their actual salary. But again, this is the politician piece. If you're working in an organisation where they're used to having, yes, it's a pay review cycle, but what you're doing is looking at inflation and seeing what you can get away with people being paid, but then PPC as a role has gone from being paid, let's say 20 grand a year a few years ago to being paid 40 grand a year. If you're not moving along with the market and doing those market comps and making sure that you're doing the right things, the people that are looking for somebody, they're going to open up a new role, and that's how you end up with that churn and the people jumping between organisations. If the people were still within the organisation, they may still only be in that same role for 2 years, because we're moving more and more towards specialisms within these roles, or they're moving, they're becoming more senior in what they do. They joined as a PPC exec, they're now a PPC manager. And having that opportunity to still grow is another thing that people are looking for. Like Pat says, not everybody wants that, but they still expect their wage to grow in real terms.
Yeah.
Which seems fair.
When you talk about specialisms, we're obviously talking about Amazon as a specialism, so e.g. a PPC role is an Amazon specialist role.
Yeah.
Look at the way, obviously, Venture Forge as an agency, how it's built in 3 specific swim lanes. So there is a team of vendor experts, seller experts, and ads experts. It's not one person or 2 people operating across 3 different parallels, if you like, because it's so complex in terms of what's required and what sits in the back end of it all. I guess there's been quite a commonality between those answers, and a lot of it does seem to come back to kind of salary and progression. So I guess, Pat, if I fire this in your direction, and there's a couple of questions that have come in around salary, what are you seeing in the industry, in the sector, in terms of how salaries are performing?
Good question. They're going up, but not as, I guess, probably not as fast as, again, the kind of, I said, the lockdown glory is, where if you've had Amazon in your CV, it's like, you probably had like 15 job offers at any one time. It's like, name your price, and you might be able to get it. They are moving forwards. Look, I think how I kind of try and explain it to businesses, and like, is if someone leaves your company, right, and they get a pay rise, and you're trying to recruit the person who's left at that level for the same salary as they're paid, and if they haven't had a pay rise in a year, you're not going to get the same level of talent, right? So my advice to companies is like, what did that person leave for? That's what someone else is willing to pay for them, and that is what someone else will be willing to pay for other people from there. So we need to kind of be using that as a benchmark, not necessarily matching it, because that becomes insane, and the industry will just pop, and I'll get blamed for it all. But someone did write on one of my posts saying you're trying to basically drive everything up, and it will collapse. And I was like, no intention. I want to have a job as well, right? I want to recruit roles. But no, they have moved forwards. But like it's kind of using that as a benchmark, because that is the market value of that. But then you need to kind of obviously steer within what your budgets are and what you're looking for. You might not need someone at that level again. You might need that person 2 years ago. We have put, and I need to send it to you guys, and actually if anyone does want this, we have put together a salary report. It finally got released like the back end of last week, which I can send to people if anyone wants to request it. I'll send it to everyone on this call as well. But they are moving forwards. Like, even compared to last year, they're moving forwards. And it's because it's a specialist skill set. And so it's hard to kind of put a number on it, because, again, and I want to caveat this, like, not every salary is the gospel truth. Different companies are going to pay an Amazon account manager differently, because Amazon might not be their major focus. It's an Amazon first brand that is their primary account, and they're taking it very, very seriously. That role by definition will probably pay more than someone it's like their 10th biggest account, right? Likewise, if it's really complex in nature, that is going to pay more than something that's a bit more simplistic, like a handful of ASINs in one territory. So but these 2 jobs might have exactly the same job title, but there could be a disparity of like 20 to 25 grand. And so it's really important. That's why I try to educate in the market, although people might not believe me, is like, actually, just because you have that title doesn't mean you're ready for that job in the context of this business. But to give you a short answer, yeah, they are moving forwards, but they kind of stabilised over the last couple of years a little bit more than they did in the previous years.
I think there's something really important, and James, I'm sure you'll have a view on this as well. There's something really important here linked to the size, maturity, and complexity of the brand who's recruiting as well. You know, someone that is on the early foundations of their marketplace journey or Amazon journey is not going to need that level of seniority necessarily, who will need to be involved in this much more strategic, business-wide changes that necessarily will come for a brand that's turning over 5, 10, 15, 25 million plus. But I do have a huge amount of empathy for the smaller brands who really want to build an in-house team or outsource to an agency, because as we all know, Amazon's not a particularly rich margin channel. Amazon take a big chunk of costs. Agencies or staff take a big chunk of costs. You know, we all know the challenges around inflation and cost of goods increases and freight increases. There's not that much pickings left within the majority of Amazon channels to invest in top tier talent. And when you've got an industry that is still quite young and that talent is in high demand, that's where the pinch points come in. So I think my best recommendation is, you know, really look at where the future of your marketplace business is going. Is, are you trying to service today and an affordability around your staffing or your agency models, or are you servicing a business that is going to look fundamentally different in the next 1, 3, 5 years? Because an investment today may very well lay the foundations for what that future opportunity is going to look like. But it is a tricky one. It's definitely a tricky one to get right.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, spot on. And it comes back to really, it's having that 3-year, 5-year plan, and also an honesty with yourself about where you are on that journey. Because if you're turning over, let's say your Amazon accounts globally are doing 1 to 2 million, you're not in a position to fully in-house everything and having your own PPC talent and everything else. There are inflection points along the way as you're growing a team and you're looking whether you in-house or outsource. And that's, let's say, 1 million, 5 million, 10 million, 15 to 20 million, and then 30 plus million. And at each of those stages, that's where you should be doing a review. But if you're growing at plus 30% year on year, you should be looking at your team every 3 months and saying, right, what do we have exactly what we need for the next 3 months, 9 months? Yeah. And at certain times in a year, you know, Q1 especially, you should be thinking, right, do I have the stock for Q4? And do I have the team for Q4? Because when it all kicks off and we're getting into the Black Friday period, are we fully staffed? And if you're not honest with yourself about where you are, you know, you could think that you're doing absolutely amazingly, which, you know, on a personal basis you are. But if you're thinking that you're a far bigger brand than you are, it's going to cause issues with your vendor negotiations, because they don't care about what you're doing, but you think that you're amazing. But it's also going to be difficult to actually work it into the P&L and actually make sure that these things are affordable.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing we've spoken about quite heavily, of course, the theme of the webinar is how the brand or the agency reacts to what they need from a staffing structure. I think the other side of it is how quickly Amazon moves. You know, there's so many different schemes that pop up. There's probably 2 more that have come to light since we've been on this call, and probably 2 that have dropped off. So I think being aware of what's happening within Amazon, as well as you rightly say, James, that reassess point every 96 months, whatever it might be, to make sure you're aware of what works best for your business, especially when it comes to vendor negotiations. And schemes can be really, really beneficial, but the operational requirements to do some of them are quite significant.
I think, Josh, there's a really obvious segue there into what's happening with AI at the minute. You know, so Amazon are rolling out consumer-facing AI tools that benefit the consumer search, benefit how we discover products and buy products. And of course, the amount of tooling that's coming into the industry from an AI point of view that makes all of our lives more effective and easier is massively astonishing. It's a crescendo of stuff that's coming into agencies and businesses. And I think we will face into the inevitability question, and I'm sure, Pat, you will get these, as why do I need a person? Never mind, why do I need to in-house or outsource when I can do it all via AI? And I guess there will be an element, you know, we as an agency utilize AI. We've utilized AI for many, many years before AI was even a buzzword, to help with resourceful tasks, to take some of the stress out of lots of manual tasks and make our time more efficient for our clients and for our team members involved. But I think there will be a growing noise in our industry about commoditization of skill set, about how AI can do roles faster than us. I've got really quite a simple view on AI. It's incredibly smart, it's learning fast, and it can take an awful lot of complexity out of laborious and manual tasks, and we should embrace and take advantage of that. But I would far rather have really smart human beings managing really smart tools than having really smart tools trying to do the job that humans have developed for many, many years and done really, really well.
Yeah, 100%. It's becoming more and more in everyday life. I think the likes of ChatGPT, I think everybody uses it for something, don't they? So definitely you've got to embrace it in some way. Well, I'm conscious we're coming towards the last sort of 10 minutes of the session. We've got quite a few questions that are starting to come through from guests on the webinar. So if I can share these, and we'll start to answer some of these as part of the panel. So got one from Leonardo here. Can you describe the pros and cons of in-house versus outsourcing? Do you see an attachment to the maturity level of the business that does this? Anybody?
James, I think you're the man for this, James.
Yes, the pro of agency is capacity, cost, and skills, and then at a certain point, the cons of a agency are capacity, cost, and skills, and it's exactly right. It's in the question. It depends on the maturity level of the business, and it depends where that business is on its journey. So when you're starting out, let's say you're a one-man band and you're doing everything yourself, the very first thing that I'd be moving over is something like PPC, because it's a very specific skill set. It's something that agencies can really help with. But then agencies can also help with extra capacity or new markets or things like that you can't do as a one-man band. But then at a certain point, it will, let's say you're turning over 30 million a year. To get a similar level of capacity within your business may cost the same in-house as it does with working with an agency. Now, it's not as flexible. You can't scale up or scale down in the same way as quickly, but it's possible. So that's the way I see it. The same things have the same pros and cons, but it depends on where you are in your business life cycle. And the final thing with this outsource versus in-house, it's not a black or white.
Yeah.
It's not I'm going to do everything in-house or I'm going to outsource everything. You always have a blend and you always have a mix. Right now I still, even though most of the things are being done in-house, I still outsource all of the reclaims processes. I don't want any of my team having to go through the numbers and actually ping Amazon seller support 3,000 times a week in order to try and get those things resolved.
Yeah.
If somebody can do that for me and I just have to pay a percentage of whatever's reclaimed, that's actually going to be a time save for me and a cost save for me.
Yeah.
If I can just maybe build on that point quickly for Leonardo's benefit, I think James is absolutely bang on. I'm not going to try and contest that at all. I think the other thing that agencies bring to the party is tools, and lots of tools, quite often lots of very expensive tools that, of course, all of our clients benefit from. But within a brand itself, there may be cost prohibitions to the quality of tool that can develop further insights, give you actionable insights, and just mature your brand. And that can sometimes be a barrier internally. And then I think knowledge, and I'm not saying that there's always more knowledge in an agency than there is in a brand, but if your brand is operating really harmoniously without many challenges, it's all going really, really well. If all of a sudden you get blindsided with a new Amazon policy change or a new terms change or something, your account goes into instant verification or suppression, those types of things can quite often just completely paralyze a brand who don't have the past expertise and have dealt with those before. Surprise, surprise, as an agency serving many, many clients, we are faced with challenges almost every day of every week, and we overcome those challenges because we've got a wider series of brands with their own independent challenges in their own independent categories. So every agency is likely to have been there, bought that, buy a t-shirt, return the t-shirt, and understand those trials and tribulations possibly more than a brand would, depending on its maturity level, to James's point.
Definitely. No, thank you very much for that, gent. If I move on to Sean's question, it actually segues quite nicely to what you were just saying there, James, about the collaboration between brand and agency. So how do you see the ideal collaboration between an agency and an in-house team? What strategies ensure seamless integration, clear communication, and maximise performance? I guess, sorry, James, looking directly at you again, you've been on both sides of this fence. Have you got any tips or bits you'd like to share on that?
Yeah, see them as your team.
Yeah,
I think it's as simple as that. See the agency as an extension of your team. See the person that you're dealing with as your account manager. See their PPC as your PPC. It's the way to make sure that the comms are clear, that they're honest, and that you're collaborative. Just never see them as an external part of the business, as completely external to you. And all of the, even when you get down into the lowest level of detail, ultimately you both want this to succeed, because both sides get paid more if it succeeds. That's essentially what we're all in it for. And when you don't see them as something that's been, as a cost that's just there and over in the ether, and you actually really partner with them, and you see them as employees, you see them as You see them even going out for drinks with them. You know, you make sure that you have that relationship. And that is also really important when you're picking the right agency, because you'll get onto calls with certain agencies and there's no rapport. Now, that shouldn't be an agency you work with. And that works both ways. You know, I know that you guys are selective in who you work with as well, because you want to make sure that you actually enjoy it, because that's the only way it's going to be a long-term and successful relationship.
Yeah. You know what? I don't think I could have worded that any better, James. If I'm completely honest, sitting on an agency side of the fence, if I'm very transparent, Jonathan, I know you'll back me on this. The best relationships we have with our clients, where we actually get the best results, are where trust exists, and trust, of course, works too. And I think back that.
Yeah, mutual respect for one another, I think, is the thing for me that, you know, I always kind of have to blink my eyes a little bit. And it happens very rarely in our agency, but there has been times historically where a brand will recruit us because of the expertise that we bring, and then ignore that expertise, or then challenge the decisions that we're making on their behalf. You know, we're not doing it because we're arrogant. We're not doing it because we're trying to be, I was going to use a word that I shouldn't use in a webinar. We're doing this because we want to see the brand succeed, because that's the only reason we exist, and that's the only reason we grow as an agency. So without that mutual respect and admiration for what each other bring to the table, there isn't really much left.
Yeah, 100%. Perfect. Moving on to Daria's question now. Pat, this will probably one quite nicely aimed at you. How do you decide which roles should be 100% dedicated to Amazon versus shared with other customers?
It's a really good question. I think, again, it comes down to how do you view Amazon internally, and how important is it as a customer or as a full funnel marketing tool, and then you kind of go from there. If it's really small, and then where do you want it to go? If you want it to be one of your biggest channels and you see the full potential in it, then I would say you want an Amazon dedicated specialist managing it. If as an account manager type role, or an Amazon advertising role, right? I get asked a lot if my Amazon ads people or Amazon PPC people can do some Google, do some Meta, do some social. The answer is pretty much no. And that's fine, but then that's why the agencies such as you guys exist, right? You can outsource it to them. I think like, it's not for like the CEO or like the marketing director if they've never done Amazon to understand how important Amazon is to your business. I think it actually comes down beyond that. If there's no Amazon IQ or Amazon experience in that senior level, you need to probably then outsource some sort of auditing of your account, whether that's with an agency, whether like on a project, or whether that's with a consultant, but someone who lives it, breathes it, can get into the minutiae and go, oh wow, this could be massive for you. And then you build how the role looks from there. And actually, if you really want to in-house it, the agency you sign up or consultant will then help you. And I do it all the time, right? I talk to my contacts and say, look, these people want to look at a role. I know it's not a role at the moment, and I'm not recruiting it and putting someone in that because it doesn't exist, and then they're going to be upset with me in a few months, and I don't want to make people's lives better, not worse. So actually speak to these guys. They'll have a nice conversation with you. They'll scope out what this looks like and how it will look, and then you'll plug me back in and I'll recruit it for you. And I think I know this is going a bit off tangent, I think there's a reluctance, and I don't know why it is, and maybe I'm only in the Amazon world, right? I don't talk to other channels, but there's a reluctance to almost invest at the early stage of Amazon. It's almost like, well, actually, you want it to be massive. Yeah. And really simplistically, I bet every single person on this call, well, they are interested, but I bet their boss, who might be less interested, shops on Amazon all the time as well. It is there. People make money from Amazon. So, like, if we get it right, the opportunity is there. But I think then it's like, you have to go back to the basics and be like, what's it look like? How does it sit? How important is it? And who's decided that? Because there's so many people who do a fantastic job at that. And then you hire.
Fantastic.
And from a structural level inside a business, there are always going to be shared roles, shared responsibilities on certain things. If you think about something like finance is always going to be shared between a business. Things like marketing or content creation, normally if they're creating content to a level that Amazon can use, it's going to be perfect for a B&Q, a Tesco, and on by wherever else you're putting that. And so as long as you have influence over those areas, operations as well, those are the things. But there are certain things that are purely Amazon skill sets and can't really be shared.
Yeah, definitely. Completely agree. Look, I'm conscious we're down into the last few seconds. Just want to say a massive thank you to everyone for joining the session. We'll, of course, follow up after this. If anybody has specific questions for Pat, James, or Jonathan, we can share emails out. But as for today, thank you very much for your time, gents, and thank you to everyone for joining us.
Thanks, guys. Much appreciated.
Thanks.
Thanks.